What's going on, everybody? Welcome to tonight's episode of the RantCast on Rumble. I think I'm on YouTube right now. Yeah, I'm on YouTube right now I was banned for a couple weeks. Tonight's episode, we got a researcher and host of Bloody History, Cory Hughes. How's it going, man?
Good. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. Here to talk some JFK, some bloody history.
So, how familiar with the Kennedy case are you?
Uh, I know bits and pieces. I haven't dove, balls deep into
Right.
JFK. I know it's, not what, I know it's, yeah.
Right. It's just hard to tell when I start mentioning names if people are following or not. I highly recommend everybody as like a starting point if they are really just not familiar at all. Watch the JFK film that came out in '92 by Oliver Stone. Not because it's a wonderful depiction of what happened, but it's a combination of a number of different things. You'll get the official story of how Kennedy was killed, with Lee Oswald being the lone assassin, shooting Kennedy from the sixth floor of the school book depository. But you'll also get what I call the official conspiracy theory, which is the CIA killed Kennedy because of Vietnam and other reasons. But the most important thing to know about the JFK film is that it was actually a propaganda film, and it was executive produced by a guy named Arnon Milchan. And Arnon Milchan was a Mossad spy who admittedly smuggled nuclear triggers out of this country. And he was eventually rewarded and transferred within his Mossad assignment to Hollywood, where he produced countless films, which I would, without hesitation, say are actually Israeli propaganda films, and JFK being the most prominent of them. It's kind of funny because the JFK film in '92 is what actually prompted government to release the documents, right? They passed the JFK Records Release Act, which led to all the documents being released, which I directly credit to my being able to put two and two together on a number of things within the assassination. So, all
That
of
was
the
after the Oliver Stone release.
yes, the Oliver Stone release prompted Congress to release the records, which is kind of amazing. I would say it's the biggest backfire ever because I believe that film ultimately was really meant to kind of poke at us and kind of rub in our face what happened because that movie has little clues throughout it, little Easter eggs that if you know what to look for, tell the real story. And so, yeah, it's a propaganda film, but still, it tells you you'll get the big picture of Kennedy, the Kennedy assassination, and what people are supposed to understand about it, right? And so from there, my work is pretty easy to follow. But I do end up going pretty deep, very micro oriented into very specific with names and dates and places and all the things that are seemingly left out of the story in every version that has been told thus far. But it is by far the most complicated. Um, I don't want to call it a riddle because I don't think it was meant to be solved, but ultimately that's what it is. It is an extremely complicated riddle that needs to be seen through the lens of tradecraft. Unquestionably, CIA spycraft, tradecraft, body doubles, dead drops, that kind of thing. The assassination itself is just saturated in tradecraft. The planning that went into the assassination was done with literally the best minds in intelligence in the world. So,
Yeah, because I
yes,
mean there was multiple shooters, right? I mean
correct.
there's even that rumor of Woody Harrelson's dad.
Right.
But he was just trying to get out of prison, right? By
Right. He's
saying that.
right. He was definitely working with in these circles. In down in Texas, you have this major overlap between the CIA, the mafia, and the third part of the equation everyone leaves out is the Israeli Mossad. When you go back to 1945, 46, coming back to America after World War II, you'll find that these three entities, even before the State of Israel was around, you had David Ben Gurion in New York City, basically running the largest arms smuggling operation the world has ever seen, which has come to be known as the Sonborn Institute. So before there was a State of Israel, you have I call them the pre-Israeli Zionists. You had them setting up shop in America, looting us of our World War II surplus that we brought back from the war to fight the Palestinians, because we wouldn't give them any support immediately after World War II. We just got out of a big war. We didn't want to start another one in the Middle East. So since we wouldn't give them any arms or support, they came and stole it. And so that will ultimately lead to the incident at NUMEC. NUMEC is the Nuclear Materials and Equipment Corporation, which was starting in 1956. It was an organization that was refining uranium for the U.S. government, for the Navy. Well, ultimately, they ended up smuggling around 600 pounds of uranium to Israel, where they used it in their nuclear facility in the Negev Desert in Dimona. And that is ultimately why Kennedy was killed. Over their failure to cooperate with his demands leading up to, in November 1963, leading up to it in the summer, starting around April, concluding around the end of May, we have what's called the Battle of Letters. And the Battle of Letters was a series of letters exchanged between Ben Gurion and President Kennedy, whereas President Kennedy is demanding access into this newly discovered nuclear facility that was actually outed by Time magazine in 1960. So starting in around 56 or 55, they started to build this reactor. By 60, the world knows about it. By 1963, they are still refusing access to the facility by inspectors. And so in May of 1963, John F. Kennedy basically said, if you do not let us into the reactor at Dimona, we are shutting you down. And they were going to cut all aid to Israel. There were some things that went on behind the scenes. Kennedy threatened Ben Gurion directly, and Ben Gurion ultimately stepped down, and he was preceded by Levi Eshkol. And the series of letters continued between Kennedy and Eshkol. And in no uncertain terms, Kennedy told Eshkol that if we don't get inspectors into Dimona, it would seriously jeopardize the relationship that the United States has with Israel. And the diplomatic translation for that is, we're going to cut all aid. And it wasn't just over Dimona. There was a lot building up post-war. Like I said, Kennedy was well aware of the smuggling that was going on and the looting of our post-war bunkers where they stored all the munitions and leftover surplus. He knew about this, and Kennedy had some personal reasons for despising the Israelis. He was somewhat of an anti-Semite, I guess you could say, in that time period. But in that time period, everybody was, really. So these are the factors that were at play leading up to the assassination in 1963, when you have really 2 or 3 people removed Ben Gurion to Jack Ruby and to all the mob bosses. Because in 1963, the Mafia, the CIA, and the Mossad are one organization. They're working together, right? So when everyone's pointing fingers at which organization was behind it, they're all the same organization. In 1963, they're interchangeable. There's really
Isn't it the mob helped Kennedy get elected?
Absolutely. Like, Kennedy shouldn't have been president. He stole the election, and it was his father, Joe Kennedy, who cut a deal with Sam Giancana in Chicago to steal ballot boxes. If I'm not mistaken, they stole a total of 3 ballot boxes, which tipped it in Kennedy's favor, and that swung the entire election to Kennedy when it should have gone to Nixon. So if it wasn't for Kennedy and the mob in the first place, Kennedy would not have been there to be assassinated. But
that's where that king kill or king suicide ritual.
The killing of the king.
Killing
the
of the
killing
king.
of the king, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Sacrificing yourself or something.
Well, there was most certainly a ritual sacrifice aspect to it. But I wasn't planning on covering that today. I thought we would.
No, I didn't.
I don't want to get you banned like the first time I'm on your show, because.
No, I mean, I go out to Rumble, the YouTube thing I just clicked on. I don't give a shit. that I get banned all the fucking time. I don't care what's said on here.
But ultimately, it was, if you had to pick a person to have greenlit the assassination, it was Ben Gurion, without question. It was a rising sentiment amongst everybody, in America, in the CIA, in the military, and uh, only the Mossad would actually have the balls enough to actually put forth something and look for a green light. I don't think anyone in America ever would, even in the CIA, not even Dulles, not even Angleton, would have had taken the initiative to have Kennedy assassinated. I think that was even one step too far for them. And we have this kind of throw mama from the train relationship with Israel. In the modern day, they do terrorism here for us, and we invade countries for them. It's kind of how the relationship works. And so I believe that for their own conscience, they all just deflected to Ben Gurion. And when he gave the green light, things were put into motion. But when you look at the pathways that they were put into motion, the CIA really did their absolute best at trying to maintain plausible deniability, because all the way down to the shooters, you have guys who, yes, worked with the CIA, but also had a relationship with the mob. Even guys like Dave Yaris and Lenny Patrick, who were like OG mobsters from Chicago from like the 20s. Even guys like that, who were in their 60s when the assassination happened, even they had a relationship with the CIA and are known to have trained agents like down in the Keys. So, the relationship between the CIA and the mob is, the CIA can say it wasn't us, it was the mafia, and they would be correct. You know what I mean? Because they
Yeah.
even though all their guys doubled as, and even though all those guys had handlers who were CIA, like Dave Chrisman and William Gaudet, I've been able to identify some of the handlers in New Orleans who are like one step up the rung from guys like Clay Shaw, who are contract agents, because there's a big difference between a contract agent and an employee of the CIA. It's a very different relationship. They'll murder their contract agents. Their employees is a little rough. Well, I say that, and then comes to mind how they killed or what the hell was his name, William, the CIA guy in the 70s, the head of the CIA in the 70s, who they killed. They found drowned off his fishing boat. But for the most part, they'll cut ties with contract agents much quicker than they will with employees because of the paper trail, right? So, but yeah, the assassination for the most part sprung from orders that came down through the Mossad to a front company called Permindex. Permindex, which was based out of Switzerland and ultimately kicked out of Switzerland because it was found to have funded the organization, the OAS, which was kind of like a paramilitary wing of the Corsican Mafia. They had done numerous attempts on the life of Charles de Gaulle, and they were funded by Permindex. And so Permindex was ultimately kicked out of Switzerland. They relocated to South Africa in 1963. And on the board of directors of Permindex and a subcompany called CMC, Centre Mondial Commercial, were guys like Clay Shaw, Angleton, Dulles directly. Dulles provided the funding for these companies through a bank called Seligman and Schroeder. So we have like the direct ties from a Mossad front company, which was founded by a guy named George Mantello. But also guys like Roy Cohn, Trump's lawyer in the 80s, was a board member of Permindex, right? So you have people from all walks of life. The Mafia, Joe Bonanno and Mo Dalitz, they sat on the board of Permindex. So it was really a who's who of Mafia, CIA, Mossad, even some of the Nazis like Hjalmar Schacht, post-war, were involved with Permindex. And so this was kind of like an assassination factory. They were responsible for the assassination of Patrice Lumumba in the Congo. And ultimately, they acted, the way I see it, is kind of like an oversight board. And then the money funneling mechanism was through Centre Mondial Commercial, which was actually being run out of Montreal by a guy named Louis Bloomfield, who was OSS during World War II. Directly connected to Clay Shaw via the OSS and through Clay Shaw's position on the board of directors of Centre Mondial Commercial. Then we have documents that I can show David Ferry, Clay Shaw, and a guy named Sergio Arcacha Smith were making trips up to Montreal to meet with Louis Bloomfield. So I've been able to reverse engineer the connections from New Orleans back to Montreal, back to Centre Mondial Commercial and Permindex, and ultimately back to the Mossad and CIA and all those other guys. So yeah, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Where was I going with that?
These names, like the documents that they keep saying they're going to release and then they don't release, or
Right.
some of these aren't any of the things that will
No.
be in these documents.
Okay, so the things that are in the documents, they could release them today, and even the self-proclaimed JFK research community would look at them and be baffled because they will have nothing to do with Kennedy. What they will have to do with are they will show relationships between certain people. That's what they're hiding. They're hiding certain relationships, particularly with a guy named David Morales, who was a big shot in the CIA, known to, if you needed something done and everyone else was just too disgusted to do it, David Morales would do it. He was that guy. Very, very important in Cuba in the pre-Castro days, during the revolution leading up to installing Castro. But ultimately, I put him directly in Dealey Plaza, fleeing Dealey Plaza with the grassy knoll shooter on the side of the Secret Service car. So, yeah, the Central Intelligence Agency can most certainly maintain to some degree, or they could for a long time, a plausible deniability. Because, like I said, all of these guys were working with the mafia as well. And when it comes to the mafia, you have Carlos Marcello in New Orleans, who was connected to Clay Shaw and all those guys, David Ferry and Kerry Thornley. A very important name, Kerry Thornley, Sergio Arcacha Smith, Emilio Santana. These are all guys who were directly connected to the assassination and in Dallas, pulling off part of the operation. So, let me see. Yeah, I'm sorry, I lost my train. I do that often. I'll go off on tangents and just talk because this thing branches off into infinity and connects to so many other things. It's just a matter of
Yeah,
like which road do you want to go down, you know?
I don't know which road to go down.
So, and as far most people want to know who the shooters were and how I came to the conclusion on who the shooters were. And like I said, the study of Kennedy is the study of relationships. And when you come to understand who people are and what their background is and who they are in relation to other people, it took me 3 years to really put the pieces together on mostly the relationships in New Orleans. And I'm still actually figuring things out to this day in regards to the men who were impersonating Oswald, because that is a very big part of the story that no one really has gotten right, and I'm still working on. So many people. What do you know about Lee Harvey Oswald? Let me ask you that first off.
I He worked for the CIA, didn't he?
Possibly.
I know that he got a job at the book depository, supposedly
What do you know
making
about
like
his history before that?
$2. I don't know, something about Cuba, but I don't know how deep. I'm not
Right. Well,
that.
at some point he had defected to the Soviet Union, right, and that's key
Mhm.
to the story because he's in the Soviet Union from 1959 until the first week of June in 1962. However, starting around January of 1961, you start to have people popping up in New Orleans, identifying themselves as Lee Harvey Oswald, associating with some of the Cubans who are connected to all the other
And
CIA
this is
guys in New
before.
Orleans. This is while Oswald is in the Soviet Union. So
Yeah.
provably he's in the
Okay.
Soviet Union, but we also have proof that somebody was here using his name. One incident was at a Ford dealership, Bolton Ford in New Orleans, where he went with a husky Cuban guy and they attempted to get a quote to buy a number of trucks that they could then send down to Cuba to assist in overthrowing Castro, right? Kind of a wild
So
story to tell.
they had these guys impersonating Oswald
Correct.
to create a character, basically.
Correct.
Because this reminds me, shit. Now I just lost my fucking train of thought because they're doing this. Oh, with the January 6th with Ray Epps, right? So you see Ray Epps. I don't know how much you know about the January 6th, probably enough.
Yeah.
But the Ray Epps thing, he's seen going, we need to go into the Capitol, blah blah blah, up until like 3 seconds before the breach of the Capitol. But then there's videos because he claims he was helping police and blah blah blah.
Right.
Or then there's videos where he went around so he could be seen on camera saying to police, "We're with you, we're here to help you, blah blah blah,"
Right.
to create
Right. But
that
he
cover.
but he knew what to do in as far as his mission goes, right? He
Mhm.
understood very clearly that he was an actor of some. He was a provocateur.
We're talking about Ray Epps.
Ray Epps, yeah, Ray Epps.
Yeah.
So Ray Epps, but so knowing that he said that
Ray
stuff
Epps
in
was
front of the
part of
cameras,
the psyop
correct,
itself, unlike
100%.
Oswald.
But the point
Oh,
I'm
I mean,
trying to
he
make is
probably.
that Ray Epps understood step by step what he needed to
Yep.
do in order to not only rile people up, but then be seen on camera saying to the
And
police that were with you to
yep.
paint a certain picture,
Narrative.
right?
Yeah.
So that is Oswald's entire life that everybody knows. They painted a picture of Oswald's life, and I promise you, none of it is true. Oswald can provably be said to have been involved in obviously CIA covert operations from the time that he was 7 or 8 years old, which obviously means it wasn't his choice, it was the choice of a parent who obviously had to have been connected to the CIA in some way, shape, or form back in 1947. There was a researcher named John Armstrong who did most of the work on pulling documents on Oswald's life to show that there were actually two children starting around 1947 who were both living under the name Lee Harvey Oswald, who both had a mother named Marguerite Oswald, who, for the most part, lived very near each other in the same cities, but they were kind of busted because they screwed up a couple times in regards to Oswald's schooling and school records that showed that there were two kids enrolled in school, first in PS 44 in Manhattan, and there's a PS 44 in Queens. So John Armstrong found that going back to, this is in the 1950s, I believe, 1952 to 1954 ish, he found the records for Lee Harvey Oswald at both PS 44s, the one in Manhattan and the one in Queens, simultaneously, not one after the other, with both grossly different descriptions of the boy in as far as height, weight, all that stuff. One of the boys was actually around 5'4" tall, and kind of a husky build, very healthy. The other one was around 4'11". This is in 1952, so early teenage years, I guess. One of them was about 4'11", weighed 20 to 30 pounds, less than the description of the other one at two different schools simultaneously. Right, so John Armstrong was able to prove over a number of years by pulling different records and pulling statements and interviewing people who had known Oswald at this time. And he basically showed that there were two children being raised under the same name. Now, this seems to have come to an end around the time that Oswald goes off to the Soviet Union. The theory that Armstrong put forth, and I say the theory that Armstrong put forth because I'm still trying to digest it. It seems to be apparently correct, but he got a lot of other things wrong. But this seems to be a correct framework. But yes, so one of them appears to have been a child who spoke fluent Russian who was then raised under the name Lee Harvey Oswald. The idea is that I believe it was something very simple. The CIA trying to get a spy into the Soviet Union. Nothing more complicated. It was 1954, the height of the Cold War. And what would the CIA be willing to do to get a spy into the Soviet Union? The answer is anything. And to the idea of raising a child who speaks fluent Russian to later exfiltrate him back to the Soviet Union as a spy makes perfect sense. And it seems as though that is what they did. Oswald then returns in 1962 in June. And the timing that Oswald returns to the States in June of 62, the very week he returned, coincides with the termination of a CIA program called AE Balcony. AE Balcony was a program that was meant to get a spy into the Soviet Union, particularly using what they called legal travel methods, meaning through getting legal visas and legal travel, not defection or anything like that, and to the Eastern Bloc countries like Lithuania and Estonia and Latvia, that kind of thing. Where did he end up? He ended up in Minsk, which is Belarus, which is in the region of those countries. So it appears as though Oswald was working under the guise of the AE Balcony program. I can't say that with certainty, but when you look at when he was there and you look at the dates that the AE Balcony program was running, it's pretty obvious that he was involved in one of the half a dozen or so programs that revolved around AE Balcony and another program called Redskin. Initially, their program to get a spy in the Soviet Union was called Redskin, and that stretched from 55 until 1960. And then in 1960, Redskin was reorganized under AE Balcony, and that became like the umbrella program. So somewhere in the midst of these programs, I promise Oswald was one of the people who they sent over there. But it seems to have varied from their legal travel operations as a defection is the only difference that I see. But all the dates seem to line up as to when those programs ran and when he was over there. Plus,
But
they were. Oh, go ahead.
well, as far as Oswald being a spy, I mean, so he was grown up to be a spy,
I believe so.
and he knew he was a spy, or is this
Yeah.
an MK Ultra
No.
type?
No. The MK
How
Ultra
does that
stuff.
work? You're like a kid, and you're like, "Look, kid, you're gonna be a spy. We need you to
I
learn
don't
this
know.
Russian."
That's well. The way I see it is that you have an Oswald here in America who was born to the son of a CIA agent. They give us a name, Robert Lee Oswald, allegedly as Oswald's father. But when you look at the pictures, there's only one of them. When you look at the one picture of Robert Lee Oswald, it looks strikingly like a guy named J. Walton Moore, who was a CIA agent who was working in Dallas at the time of the assassination. So they're screwing with us in regards to the pictures that they're giving us, saying that it's Oswald's father, right? So Oswald's father could be somebody completely different. His name, Oswald, might not have even been a birth name. These guys were at the time before the digital age, they became masters of like faking paper documents because that's what they had. You
Yep.
know what I mean? So I don't believe any of the birth certificates or none of the stuff connected to Oswald directly. I barely believe that was ever a real name. Um,
And we know, like, through espionage and stuff, like the Chinese, they're willing to. I mean, they raise kids to be spies, right? I
yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
they have an army of children spies being raised to send them over here to, like date people in politics
Like
and
Eric
stuff.
Swalwell.
Yeah, dude. Like,
Yeah.
and what's crazy is when that story kind of was breaking, Netflix released some series on spies, and one of the episodes was sexpionage.
Spycraft. Yeah.
Yeah, spycraft. That's
Yeah.
right. Yep. And one was all about sexpionage, and yeah, they'll raise someone from a kid, a girl from a kid to
And you have to
date
think
Stalwell.
in the in 47 in the early 50s, they were still experimenting and working out their own systems. It wasn't as sophisticated as they are today. It was kind of a mess and a free for all, and they were just throwing shit at the wall and see what stuck. For the most part, and the Soviet Union was like the focus because that was what that was. They were the enemy in the Cold War, and that was what they used as the cover. We need to fight this war on communism to keep all the money flowing in, right?
Hmm.
So, um,
Yeah, yeah. This JFK thing goes deep, and Oliver Stone he just released a new
yeah.
series on
So
JFK.
it really frustrates me because I can't figure that guy out because he'll say some things that are very true, but then he'll say some stuff that's such complete nonsense, and then he'll say some distractionary stuff that gets you to look to the right when you should be looking to the left. And so I'll give you an example. Like there's a scene in his recent documentary where he's talking about this woman, Victoria Adams, who is allegedly the alibi for why she's the reason why Oswald couldn't have like run down the stairs and all this stuff. So allegedly, how it goes is the official story says Oswald fired from out the sixth-story window, and then he ditches the rifle, and then he runs down the back stairway, 6 flights of stairs, And that really, it's total bullshit. It never happened. I'll get to what really did happen, but the official story is that, or the official conspiracy theory, I should say, because there's always an official conspiracy theory. The official conspiracy theory says that Victoria Adams was coming down from the third floor, and because she was coming down the stairs from the third floor, Oswald never passed her. Therefore, Oswald couldn't have run down the stairs within the 90 seconds required in order to be seen drinking a Coke in the second floor lunchroom, right? So that's how the story goes. Allegedly, 90 seconds after the assassination, Oswald is allegedly seen in the second floor lunchroom of the book depository where he's drinking a Coke. That story is complete fiction. It never happened. But what Oliver Stone actually did was he got you tied up in that story about Victoria Adams not seeing Oswald, and he left out the most important parts of the story, the relevant parts of the story. That's a distractionary story about Victoria Adams not seeing Oswald because Oswald was not in the building at all that day. So, Victoria Adams gets to the bottom of the stairs. When she gets to the bottom of the stairs, she sees two men near the electric panel on the first floor. William Shelley, who is one of the bosses of the building, and a guy named Billy Lovelady, who is one of the guys who was with William Shelley at the time of the shooting, allegedly. Well, this is relevant, and I'm sorry for this dragging on, but it is relevant because she sees them at the electric panel where William Shelley was turning the power back onto the building. So at 29 minutes after 12, the power gets killed. We know this because multiple witnesses said that the phones went out, the power went out, and the elevator got stuck. The power was killed so the elevator could get stuck on the 6th floor so that the real shooters could have a way out of the building. And thankfully they did because Victoria Adams pushes the button for the elevator and it didn't work. And that's why she took the stairs in the first place. So, the most important thing about this entire tale is that William Shelley was seen by the power box because he's the one who killed the power to the building and he's the one who turned the power back on immediately after the assassination. And that links the hierarchy of the book depository directly to the assassination. And William Shelley, most certainly the book depository was a CIA front. William Shelley was a OSS guy from 41 to 45 during the war. He worked in CIA publishing his whole life after that, starting at the book depository and then moving on to the Scott Forsman Company, which was one of the multiple publishers in that building. Another publisher in the book depository on that day was a Macmillan Company. William Harvey, who was a big-time CIA guy stationed in Italy at the time of the assassination, he went to go work for Macmillan as soon as he got out of the CIA. I mean, he's one of the legends of the CIA. So all of the companies in that building were CIA contractors at a minimum and CIA fronts more probably. But the book depository, all the guys who ran the book depository were in the OSS during World War II. O.V. Campbell, a really important guy named Roy Truly, and William Shelley. Those were the top three guys at the book depository. All worked for the OSS, all worked in CIA publishing for the rest of their lives. So, I mean,
and that floor was like a cold storage or something before that?
So they'll tell you a lot of things about what was going on in there and on that day with like replacing the floor and a whole bunch of other stuff. But ultimately, the book depository had 7 floors. The 7th floor is pretty much irrelevant. It wasn't used. The 6th floor was used for their inventory. So what they did was books would come in bulk. They would store them up on the 6th floor. The 5th floor was also the book depository, like directly company. But then the 4th, the 3rd, and the 2nd were leased out to those publishing companies I already mentioned, right? So the only floors at play here really are the 1st floor, the 5th, and the 6th. But yeah, they would store the books in boxes on the 6th. Then when they would get orders on the 5th, they would go up to the 6th. They would grab the books they need. They would fill the orders. That's kind of how that works. So all the stock that would come in would be stored on the 6th floor.
Yeah, because it wasn't a book depository but a couple years before the Kennedy assassination.
Couple months. They had only moved into that building in July. They signed that deal in July. And actually, before moving in there and after leaving their original location, because they were started in 1948 at another location, I think down Houston Street. And so they ended up moving into the Daltex building for several months before leaving there and moving into that building, which was called the John Sexton building. And it was owned by a guy named D.H. Byrd, who was directly connected to the Civil Air Patrol that Oswald was in, and the CIA and Dulles and all this stuff. So that little corner right there between the book depository and the Daltex building, that was like a den of espionage. There is some speculation that the book depository wasn't just shipping books. So there were a number of crates after the assassination. There were a number of crates located in the building that books were definitely not shipped in. The kind of things you'd see in a movie that they shipped a whole bunch of arms and ammunition in, like those big wooden crates.
Yeah.
Big ones like that were found in the basement. There's like a lower, not a basement, but a lower floor of that building. So there's some speculation that books were not the only things getting shipped out of there. Because you got to think the CIA started like paint companies so they could ship drugs, you know, so they would put the drugs in the paint and then they would ship it in mass, and like they would get through customs, usually because people are on the take. Everyone's on the fucking take because everything's broken in this country. But yeah, in 1963, the corruption was just out of fucking control. And then like you have all the actual conspiracy that went on within the Dallas police and the Dallas sheriff. And the connection to the CIA there is through Cabell, right? Earl Cabell and his brother, that was the mayor of Dallas, and they connect down to like William Alexander and Henry Wade, who was the district attorney, and those guys connect right to Decker and Curry and all those guys at the local level. So yeah, the local cops were only like, you know, two people removed directly from the CIA. Plus, all those guys were connected to Jack Ruby. Jack Ruby was most certainly mafia. People say, well, how could he be mafia? He was Jewish. Well, because the mob was run by Jews, not Italians. Well, technically they were Italian Jews, but really that relationship right there goes back to the 1930s with the assassination of like Salvatore Maranzano. So really, there was only a Sicilian. When people think that the mob was run by Italians, they're really thinking Sicilians, not Italians. They're thinking Sicilian Italians, because that's the stereotype. But really, the Sicilians only ran the mob for 10 years, 1921 to 1931. When Salvatore Maranzano was killed, he was killed at the behest of Meyer Lansky, who's a Jew. And who actually pulled the trigger on those guys? Albert Anastasia, Lepke Buchalter, Lucky Luciano. Like, all the big mobsters were Jews. Bugsy Siegel, Mickey Cohen. Like, where's your Sicilians? There were none. It was all Jews back then, right? So that's the relationship there between that you'll find between the mafia and the Israelis going back to like 46, when you have emissary of the Haganah, Reuven Daphne. Reuven Daphne sent over by Ben Gurion, and he goes and meets with Bugsy Siegel out in Los Angeles. They strike up a relationship there. Before you know it, Meyer Lansky and Ben Gurion have a direct relationship where they are both now operating their smuggling operations. Because you have to think, like, Ben Gurion comes to America. He wants to do this smuggling operation, right? Well, who the fuck controls the ports? The mafia. And who runs the mafia in 1945, 1946? Meyer Lansky does, right? So those guys become kissing cousins, and some would even say that if it wasn't for the mafia and the amount of money that they brought in through their setup of the drug trade, particularly the relationship between Venezuela and Saigon, which grows up later on in the 60s, right? But that was all set up by Meyer Lansky and Menachem Begin. And so the relationship between, you cannot separate the Israelis and the U.S. mafia in 1963. Period. Right? And the same can be said about the Central Intelligence Agency and the mafia. That relationship starting with Luciano. Well, technically you can go back to like the days of Arnold Rothstein and the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, but really the relationship with the federal government and the mafia started with Luciano in the docks back in like, what year would that be, like 42, 43, while the war was going on. So yeah, all these guys are in bed together. The CIA and the Israelis, like, that relationship, you can go back to like the end of World War II and the post-war deal between Reinhard Gehlen, the CIA, and the pre-Israeli Zionists, where they, this is where they ended up funneling all the Nazis out of Europe and into South America, and like not paperclip, like the real op before paperclip, where they funneled like 230,000, like almost 250,000 Nazis, the entire surviving hierarchy, into South America. That thing. That is where the relationship really is solidified between the pre-Israeli Zionists, the post-war Nazis, aka the Galen organization, and the budding CIA. Right. So 1947, you have this fusion of these entities, and that is the cabal that is running the world and ruining the world today. So obviously there's been some shifts and changes within it over the years. Like you had the introduction of the Saudis brought in,
Mhm.
until they were until 1979, right? In 79, you have like the Safari Club, George Bush, and the CIA within the CIA. And so the cabal has kind of like fluctuated over the years. At different times, the Moroccans were brought into it, and then left out. And seemingly at the time of 9/11, it was the Saudis, the Israelis, and us. With a little bit of Pakistan thrown in there, right? But today it seems like the cabal is us and the Israelis, and like that's it. So, but yeah, it's the same cabal in one form or another, that stretches back to Kennedy and before, you know?
Man, I just learned today that the under Kennedy is when we first started flying the American flag we have today with the 50 stars. I just thought that was
I didn't
interesting.
realize it was that late. If I would have bet it would like be in the 1950s or something. Would it have to have been after we got Hawaii and all that
Yeah,
stuff?
and Kennedy was the first president that he was inaugurated under the flag we have today.
That's interesting. I did not know that.
It is. I don't even know why that popped up on my thing. I mean, yeah, it popped up I think yesterday. Maybe it was after you messaged me, and then it was like,
But yeah, the
starts
story
feeling
of
Kennedy
Kennedy
stuff.
leads to everything else. It leads to obviously Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King. Um, all the guys who were in the background in Kennedy seem to resurface in the Martin Luther King investigation. So one of the connections that I found, James Earl Ray talks about Raul. Raul is allegedly this Cuban or Italian looking guy who um, set him up to take the fall for the assassination of Martin Luther King. And there's always been like a lot of like debate over whether this person exists and this and that. Well, I believe I have identified the real Raul, and it directly connects to some of the inner story of the Kennedy assassination. In particular, that he was the short tramp in Dealey Plaza. So, yes, I completely agree with James Earl Ray that this person was real. And the relationship I was able to show between him and the owner of the ice skating rink that David Ferry and his crew allegedly went to uh, as an alibi after the assassination. So, one of the shooters, David Ferry, was one of the key guys in the planning, and he was a central person in the organization of many of the shooters because the relationship between him and the various shooters that I was able to put in New Orleans, right? So his inner circle, I was able to put in the book depository and on the roof of the depository and at the Daltex building. But David Ferry allegedly did not. The official story says he did not leave New Orleans until the afternoon of November 22nd. So he wasn't in Dallas, allegedly. But I was able to put him in Dallas, and I debunked his entire alibi, which included a story about him going to the Winterland ice rink, right? So allegedly he goes to this ice rink with two kids. Well, they're about 18, so they're not really kids, but they're way younger than he is. Allegedly, the two of them go ice skating. He's supposed to ask the guy about how to run an ice skating rink. Then they allegedly go to Galveston, and all this time, um, he's really just hiding out in Hammond, Louisiana, right? So I was able to find enough documents and witness statements to debunk the official conspiracy theory of him having gone to this ice skating rink, which was really just a setup to establish an alibi. Because David Ferry was one of two shooters on the grassy knoll. David Ferry fired the very first shot that struck Kennedy in the throat. When Kennedy grabs his throat, right about the frame of Alchin's photo number one, right in front of the book depository, is about when Kennedy gets shot. And we have a contradiction between the Alchin's photo and the Zapruder film. The Zapruder film is obviously it's tampered to the point that I would almost call it a forgery. But the point at which you see Kennedy lift his hands up like this in the Zapruder film, is seemingly contradicted by another angle taken by a guy named Jim Altgens. And the photo that he took, the very famous Altgens photo, it shows the vehicle much closer to the front of the book depository. And Kennedy is already grabbing his throat at that point. So we have some discrepancies there.
And that film didn't come out until what, like 10 years after the fact,
Yeah.
right? So they had
Yeah.
all that time to play with it and do whatever they need to do with it.
Yep. Yeah, and a couple years before it was played on Geraldo's show, I think it was like 1973, so it would have been right 10 years. A couple years before that, a copy of the Zapruder film actually leaked in France. I have a whole bunch of documents where the government, the FBI, is like freaking out trying to track down this copy of the Zapruder film that allegedly leaked.
How the fuck does it leak back then? Like,
Who
you
the
get a
hell knows?
reel to reel and you
Yeah.
run and you
Yeah.
gotta
That's,
fucking.
that's exactly
Dang.
what it was. Real
Yeah.
to real.
I mean, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. But yeah, almost everything we know about particularly about Lee Harvey Oswald, but almost everything we know about the assassination and the assassination story was like a series of planned, scripted events, almost like a Truman Show. Really.
To set narrative and
Correct.
and play out.
Right. To me, it appears as though, if I had to explain it, it would be like, instead of a whole bunch of actors over a multi-year period, meaning agents within the CIA who were involved in this setup, going out of their way to impersonate Oswald, leaving a false impression to the world. Because after the assassination, what happens is every goddamn Tom, Dick, and Harry who ever saw anybody who even looked like Lee Harvey Oswald, they would call in and say, I had Lee Harvey Oswald in my store. There's literally hundreds of incidents of people calling and reporting that they interacted with Oswald. Now, this brings us to the impersonation of Oswald. Not a single incident that we know of and are told that Oswald did Oswald ever do. Oswald's alleged to have lived at several boarding houses in Oak Cliff. He was alleged to have shot J.D. Tippit. He was alleged to have gone to the shooting range and fired at other people's targets. He was alleged to have done 100 things. He didn't do any of those things. All of those things were incidents that Oswald was intentionally being set up, particularly by two men, William Seymour and Kerry Thornley. Kerry Thornley is an interesting guy. I just finished my chapter on Kerry Thornley this past week. And Kerry Thornley is a guy who joins the Marines in 1956, but it's in the reserve, so he's still in high school. He gets called in 1958. 1959, he's stationed in Santa Ana, California, in the Marine Air Control Squadron training facility with Lee Harvey Oswald. Oswald had just gotten back from Atsugi, Japan, where he was in Marine Air Control Squadron number 1. And then after Thornley is in the Marines with Oswald in Santa Ana, Thornley gets transferred to Marine Air Control Squadron number 1 in Atsugi, the same unit that Oswald had just been in. These guys look nearly identical. There's maybe an inch or two height difference. They have the same receding hairline, and they most certainly knew each other. When Kerry Thornley gets to Atsugi, for some reason, he makes the decision to write a book about Lee Harvey Oswald, and he starts to gather information about Lee Harvey Oswald. And he ultimately does write a book about Oswald, and it's completed about 2 years before the assassination. It's called The Idle Warriors. It's about a Marine who defects to the Soviet Union and then comes back and shoots the president. It doesn't include the shoot the president part until after the assassination. He amends the book to add that, but it has everything in it leading up to him shooting the president. And so, kind of a dead giveaway. Kerry Thornley provided a 50-page affidavit to Jim Garrison, the DA in New Orleans, who brought the case against Clay Shaw. And when you read through this 50-page affidavit, to me, it reads like a confession. He confesses through implication. He puts himself around all of the major suspects that he wouldn't know are suspects, especially in 1967 when he was interviewed. So basically, he impersonated Oswald all over New Orleans, and then I was able to connect Kerry Thornley to Marina Oswald, who was Oswald's wife, allegedly. Right? It was a set up marriage. But I was able to connect Kerry Thornley to Marina Oswald, and Kerry Thornley and Marina Oswald were setting Oswald up the whole time. Marina Oswald was in on it. There are numerous notations that were written on the backs of various photographs that are incriminating to Oswald being a communist and wanting to shoot people. Well, thanks to handwriting analysis, it's been determined that most of those were written by Marina Oswald. It was her handwriting on very key documents, like the Selective Service card that was allegedly found in Oswald's wallet with the name Alec Heidel on it. So, yeah, so I was able to connect Kerry Thornley to Marina Oswald, and like a multi-month spree of them going around places where Oswald is talking about communism, about loving guns, about hating Kennedy, like saying things to be noticed that would stick in people's minds. And so after the assassination, you have hundreds of people calling because seeds were planted in their mind that he was a communist and that he was bitter, and he left enough of a trail so that when Oswald was seen on TV and they start to give the backstory, people would say, oh my God, that's the guy that was in my store. But in reality, you're not going to remember specifically the facial details of somebody in your store, especially if somebody on television looks extremely similar, same height, same build, same weight, same receding hairline, but just not them, which is exactly what they were doing. So half of the incidents I've been able to assign to Kerry Thornley, and in most of the incidents in Dallas, I was able to assign to William Seymour, particularly because everywhere he went, he was seen with a guy described as a husky Latino with a pockmarked face. And when you go through the Kennedy literature, you will find there is a man named Lawrence Howard who is continuously in the story from about 1960 through the assassination. And he's running with a guy named William Seymour. And William Seymour, like Kerry Thornley, same height, same weight, same build, same receding hairline, just enough similar to where he can go out, talk about communism and shoot guns and stuff. And when Kennedy is shot, people will remember him as Lee Harvey Oswald through that planted seed of suggestion, even if it's a year or 2 years before. Because it's amazing how many people seem to have remembered Oswald. But it was a lot of these incidents were at times when it couldn't have been Oswald because he was provably in the Soviet Union or elsewhere, right? So a lot of times people like to say that Oswald went to Mexico City and that he attempted to get a visa to go to Cuba to try to get into Cuba. Then it's a really bad cover story because it's not complete and it's kind of vague, and there are some things not fleshed out about it, like when was he trying to get into Cuba? Was he trying to get into Cuba now? Was he trying to get into Cuba after the assassination? So there's a lot of times they started to paint a picture setting him up, but they didn't follow through on what they were doing. That's evident a lot of times in the assassination story. But this was Kerry Thornley who went to Mexico City. It was obviously Kerry Thornley. Then I can trace Kerry Thornley back through Alice, Texas on the way back to Dallas, and through a whole number of small towns in Texas. So yeah, the story is not nearly as mysterious as people would like it to be when you start to talk about like the duplicate Oswalds, right? It sounds all like spooky and like whatever, clones and all this crap, right? But no, it's not really that spooky. This was typical tradecraft in 1963, and they did a masterful job because I do not believe, nor do I have any evidence that Lee Harvey Oswald was present at the book depository on November 22nd, or that he ever worked there. The only evidence we have that he had anything to do with the book depository is his job application dated October 15th, and allegedly a jacket was found of his the next day, a dark blue jacket that he allegedly owned. However, it's hard to tell with some of these things because some information just pops up out of nowhere with nothing to back it, and who knows what the fuck, where people got some of the shit, like the information on the jacket, right? So, but
I mean, if they were setting this up for years,
well,
maybe
here's
not.
the thing. I believe the setup for years was to create this persona to get a spy back into Cuba. That's what I believe the initial plan was.
And then it changed.
And then it was repurposed. Right. I believe it was repurposed somewhere around February of 1963 because the setup of Oswald began the second week of March 1963 because we have the ordering of the rifle and the revolver, right? So we have numerous problems with both of those. I'm not even going to waste any time talking about the delivery to the P.O. box with the false name because that's obvious. They would have rejected it with a false name under the rules of who can accept goods at a PO box, right? When you register it, you register one or two names. Those are the only people who can get mail there. Everyone else gets rejected. Yet the rifle and the revolver were allegedly delivered to an alias there, but still it made it through to Oswald. Doesn't make any sense. Plus the revolver ends up actually does get rejected at the post office, and it gets sent to a holding facility. Somebody goes and picks it up there, and the name on the receipt is Paxton. Has nothing to do with Oswald. I don't even know how it got connected to Oswald. Somehow there was a piece of paper that had his initial PO box on it, but there's no evidence whatsoever that he ever ordered it. Plus, there's problems with it, like the coupon that was sent along with cash and a whole bunch of other like fine details that I don't need to go into. But he never ordered the rifle. He never ordered the PO box. He never went to Mexico City. He never went to the shooting range to fire at other people's targets. He never lived at any of the boarding houses he was alleged to have lived at. He never did any of the things he was alleged to have done. And then when I get to the book depository, I can't find any actual evidence he ever worked in the book depository, but I do have evidence that William Seymour was at the book depository on November 22nd, 1963. He's captured in the Robert Hughes film Out Back of the Book Depository, where he's captured getting a signal from a guy named Trantham, a detective with the sheriff's office. And so I've been able to trace William Seymour's movements throughout the building, and I know it's William Seymour because of his exit from the book depository. So allegedly at 12:40 p.m., Oswald is supposed to be in two places at once. This is amazing. Oswald is alleged to have gotten on a bus at 12:40 p.m. where he flees Dealey Plaza and then gets into a cab and then heads to Oak Cliff. But also Oswald is seen fleeing from the side of the book depository, running down the hill and getting into a light green Nash Rambler station wagon, which then flees, and the driver is described as a husky Latino, or sometimes he's described as a Negro, wearing a tan jacket. So we have Oswald seen in two different places, and I've been able to thoroughly explain both sightings. And the person who was fleeing out the side of the book depository was most certainly William Seymour, not Lee Harvey Oswald, because he gets into the green Nash Rambler, which was owned and it was registered to Lawrence Howard, the husky Latino with the pockmarked face, who I put on the 6th floor of the book depository. This is the husky Latino with the pockmarked face who is seen all over with Lee Harvey Oswald going back to 1961, mid-1961, from the Havana Bar in New Orleans to the shooting range to everywhere in between. So
you said, when did they start to set up Oswald for
the very first incident where Oswald is being? Well, here's the thing: there were obviously incidents before the one I'm about to tell you, because we have a letter from Hoover that indicates in October of 1960 he was aware that somebody was using Oswald's name and birth certificate, and they needed to figure out what was going on. That is 3 or 4 months prior to the first incident that I'm aware of, which is in January of 1961, took place at the Bolton Ford dealership in New Orleans. So allegedly 2 men go in there. One of them gives the name of Lee Oswald. The other one gives the name of Joseph Moore. The guy who gives the name Joseph Moore is described as a husky Latino with a pockmarked face, a description we see repeatedly over the next 2.5 years leading up to the assassination, often accompanying Oswald. And I've determined this man is Lawrence Howard. There's no one else it could be. There's no one else in the assassination story or the inner circle of any of these men other than Lawrence Howard. And so we have this incident in January of 61 involving Lawrence Howard, where they're trying to set up Oswald. Oswald provably in the Soviet Union until June of 1962. So that is the first incident I have, but obviously the FBI knew about previous incidents because of the memo from Hoover indicating as much. Why did they do that? Why did they impersonate Oswald if he was in the Soviet Union? I think they were sloppy. I think that they had never done anything on this scale. They were working through how to do it as they were doing it. When you look at the number of incidents that are alleged to have been Oswald, that clearly were not Oswald, and clearly at times that it could never have been Oswald, it becomes obvious to me, at least, that they were experimenting and didn't understand the repercussions. Plus, another thing is, in 1963, they had zero concept that we would ever have anything like the internet that would have basically the combined total of human knowledge at our fingertips, right? Like,
Yeah.
and the analysis of 60 years past the assassination, they didn't have any fucking idea that their impersonating Oswald would go any further than the police report, right? They didn't know it would be
Yeah.
analyzed to death by nerds like me, right? Like, so they were sloppy because they didn't understand the larger scale implications of what they were doing in the context of an investigation. You know what I mean? Like, here's an
Yeah.
example. Here's a crazy example. So when Oswald allegedly goes to Mexico City, but it wasn't Oswald. Oswald, I can prove, was still in New Orleans on the date he's alleged to have arrived in Mexico City, which was September 27th, 1963. He allegedly arrives at 10 o'clock in the morning. It was Kerry Thornley down there for sure. But at the exact same time that they had somebody down there impersonating Oswald, they had another Oswald who was a member of Naval Intelligence, who spelt his name Osswald, who lived in New York. They had him go on assignment to Mexico City, where he stood on college campuses handing out flyers about communism. We have the statements from him admitting that he did that. There was also a Latino or Hispanic Oswald named Osvaldo that did the same thing and was known to have been in Mexico City at the same time. And all this is in the FBI files. So we've got Oswald in Mexico City. We've got Oswald with 2 S's in Mexico City. And we've got Osvaldo in Mexico City at the same time with the same travel dates. What the fuck are they doing here? Right? Like, what are they doing here? Because any investigator in the FBI comes across this and they are going to know what's going on. The average Joe Schmo like me and you wouldn't at the time, but an investigator in the FBI who most likely has a background in World War II, because everybody in who worked in the FBI or CIA, all these guys worked for James Angleton during the war, right? So it didn't matter who you were. If you had half a brain and you were in the war and you're now working for the FBI, CIA, whatever, you had loyalty to James Angleton. So it's really easy for one person to manipulate an entire narrative for all kinds of organizations, right? But man, I totally lost my train of thought. I apologize.
Well, like, it's crazy to think that they had basically been setting a narrative for Oswald, to be a spy.
Mm-hmm.
But just the fact that they were setting narratives then, like, how far they've gone with setting narratives now. We have the revelation of the method type stuff in the movies, and is that where a lot of it's happened now? You think, like, as far as like implanting the things into people's heads before they happen, because that's
I'm
what they
really
basically did with Oswald.
yes.
Someone wrote a book about him. Like, what the fuck was so
Right,
amazing about Lee Harvey Oswald at
right.
that time to
Well,
write a fucking book?
well, here's the weird thing about Kerry Thornley, and from what I've concluded about Kerry Thornley is that much of the assignment of setting Oswald up fell to him. And I'll give you a couple examples. So the known alias of Lee Harvey Oswald was Alec Heidel, right? Most people know that, even people only vaguely familiar with the story. That was allegedly the name that was written on the Selective Service card that was found in his wallet, that was allegedly left at the Tippit shooting, but then disappears. But then the card is then found in Oswald's possessions later on. It's funny how that worked. But that Selective Service card with the name Alec Heidel on it that Oswald allegedly had in his possession was determined through handwriting analysis to have been written by Marina. So it was most certainly not his. So they used the name Heidel to set him up. And it turns out there was a guy in the Marines with him named Heindel, but everyone would call him Heidel. So people just assumed that Oswald just took that name Heidel and used it as his alias. I would argue Oswald never used that alias at all. It had nothing to do with it. Never knew. No, he didn't know anything. He was like totally blindsided when he got arrested. I had no idea of any of this. But see, when it comes to the Fair Play for Cuba Committee flyers that he was allegedly handing out on the street corner in New Orleans back in August of 1963, August 9th, with those flyers that had stamped on them the address 544 Camp Street, which was allegedly the address linking him to Guy Bannister and David Ferry and all of the Cuban operations going on in New Orleans, which were being run by the CIA, right? So allegedly that's kind of supposed to be used as the proof that Oswald was working with CIA because he stamped the address of a CIA basically front business on these flyers. But when you dig into that story, you'll really find that Oswald never had those flyers printed. It was an assignment. They were handed to him and he handed them out. The flyers were printed by Kerry Thornley. And when Kerry Thornley had the flyers printed from Jones Printing, a guy named Harold Weisberg went and interviewed Douglas Jones, who owned Jones Printing, and he talked to him and showed him a bunch of pictures, and Jones picked out 4 pictures of Kerry Thornley being the man who actually commissioned the flyers, not Oswald, right? So we can say with certainty it was Thornley who had the flyers printed, and so logic would dictate that it was Thornley who stamped the 544 Camp Street address on those flyers. Hence, that would solidify the relationship at the time between Kerry Thornley and the occupants of 544 Camp Street, mainly Guy Bannister, David Ferry, Sergio Arcacha Smith, a couple other of the Cubans who were involved in these Cuban operations. But the point I'm getting to is that the name that was given by Kerry Thornley to Douglas Jones was Leon Osborne, okay? Now, when we rewind to Oswald's associations in the Marines, he was in Marine Air Control Squadron with a guy named Mac Osborne, spelled the same way. So we have Kerry Thornley provably giving an alias, Leon Osborne, to the guy Douglas Jones at Jones Printing. That links him to the alias of Osborne. That links him to the Marine Air Control Squadron that he was in with Lee Harvey Oswald, right? So Oswald was not the only person to know these names to use them as aliases. Kerry Thornley did also, because he was there, and I can prove it was Kerry Thornley at Jones Printing. Hence, logic would dictate it was Kerry Thornley every time an alias was used connected to Oswald's Marine Squadron. So, Kerry Thornley played such a major role in this setup. It's absolutely fucking unbelievable. He impersonated him all over the place, up to and including the shooting of J.D. Tippit, where, see, oftentimes he would be seen doing something, talking about something. He wouldn't even give a name, right? But oftentimes he was seen with a pregnant woman with a child, obviously Marina Oswald and her daughter, June. So all I really had to do was connect Kerry Thornley to Marina Oswald, and then I could fill in all the gaps on all the sightings, allegedly, of Oswald, where he was seen with a pregnant woman, where he was driving a car, because Oswald never drove a car. Never. Never ever. He had one driving lesson and he was horrible and swore never to do it again, and he didn't. So there are dozens of sightings of Oswald where he's driving a car with a pregnant woman, and those were all Kerry Thornley. It was also Kerry Thornley who shot J.D. Tippit along with David Ferry. And so it took me a long time to piece together the Tippit shooting. J.D. Tippit was an officer who was shot right after 1 o'clock, about 2.5 miles from the shooting of Kennedy. So J.D. Tippit was in Dealey Plaza. He was affiliated with David Ferry, who was one of the shooters on the knoll. And so Tippit leaves from Dealey Plaza, and then he goes and he is seen sitting at a bus stop, right? So this cop is sitting at a bus stop. It's about 1:45. And nobody gets off the bus, right? So allegedly, he's supposed to be waiting for somebody. Nobody gets off the bus, and he panics. He then flees to a record store called the Top 10 Record Store. So he enters Top 10 Records. He makes a panicked phone call, and it rings probably 7 or 8 times for the amount of time that he hung on to it. Nobody answers, and he leaves from there in a panic. So obviously, Tippit, the cop who shot, was involved somehow with the assassination, waiting to pick somebody up whom he was told to pick up by David Ferry, whom he speaks with in Dealey Plaza. This is all seen by a witness named Velma, who's behind the book depository, who basically pinpoints J.D. Tippit, and I was able to identify David Ferry as the man he was talking to. David Ferry, the central figure in New Orleans, who's like the central hub of all these conspirators in New Orleans. So, but yes, I was able to put Kerry Thornley in the position where he's the one who shot J.D. Tippit along with David Ferry. There were 2 assassins before Kerry Thornley then flees to the Texas Theater. And at the time that Oswald is arrested out of the ground floor of the Texas Theater, you have Kerry Thornley, who is arrested from the balcony and taken out the back door of the theater. That's seen by numerous witnesses, and there's even a police report documenting as such. So yeah, there's nothing that we're told in the official story about Kennedy is true at all. And the funny thing is, if you read the documents, it's obvious. Like, everything contradicting the official story is right there in the documents, and all you got to do is read them to know that the official story is like complete and total nonsense.
And they even got Harry Connick wrapped up in it, huh? You see in that with Jim Garrison and Thornley, Garrison charging Thornley with perjury.
Oh,
and
that's
then
right.
those get
That's right.
dropped by
Because
Harry
his
Connick Sr.
yeah, because his dad was involved in that. I totally forgot about that. Yeah, yeah.
It's
His
like,
name comes up a couple
holy
times.
shit.
Um, so the here's the thing. Like, so Garrison came so fucking close, so close. He doesn't even know how. He never knew how close he actually came. Really, because he had David Ferry in his office the Monday after the assassination, where he was arrested and then questioned by the Secret Service, the FBI, and who the hell knows who else. And David Ferry was one of the shooters. So that's how close Jim Garrison came, and that quickly. But then he shelves it because he assumes the feds got it, and he shelves it until 1967 when he takes a plane ride with Senator Russell. And Russell is like, of course it was a conspiracy, right? And so that's when Jim Garrison gets involved, and it's truly a miracle what he pulled off. When you read the Garrison documents, God, without having the internet and our ability to Google shit, he had to send people out to go find people and interview them and then like connect dots manually. And he didn't have government documents. They weren't giving him shit, right? The how close he came is fucking unbelievable. It's truly unreal. It's unbelievable. Amazing, amazing investigative team that he had working on this. God, from 67, he worked on it really well past the Clay Shaw trial into the 70s, 78, I think maybe he worked on it till. Yeah. I mean, and then he started to connect the dots to like Martin Luther King. Like he knew some of these lower level CIA mafia guys who were like one or two rungs below guys who were actually involved in the assassination, who were like associates, and guys like Jules Rico Kimball. Just, I mean, to tell him everything,
It's
amazing.
crazy just how much like is involved. I mean, this is like deep stuff as far as like all these connections and stuff. And then from setting up like a narrative, uh the setup itself, and then like I remember seeing something about the body doubles that they
Right.
used to try to reconstruct Kennedy's face or something like that. I mean, couldn't Kennedy himself just been a double put in place to take that shot and then go
Okay, so
off
they needed Kennedy
an
dead.
island?
So there was that theory that he like hid under the secret compartment or some nonsense, but the reality is he was going to end Israel, and Israel is crucial central hub of this new world order. I don't know why, because in 60
Well,
fucking years, the
yeah.
country is a shit fucking show. It is a goddamn political nightmare over there. They can't fucking organize nothing. It's unfucking believable. I mean, it's not surprising they couldn't keep their fucking country together. It's fucking obvious. I would have told you that in 1940 fucking 8. But
With them, I mean, like you said at the beginning, with the mob in Israel helping Kennedy get into office, right? I mean,
well, Kennedy
could
behind the
it all
scenes
just
made.
be a big setup to be a massive psyop? I mean, Kennedy involved in everything.
I don't think so at all. I don't think so. His This is the way I see it. His number one goal was to get rid of nukes. And like that was a very heavy emphasis on that. He gave speeches about it. He was in private discussions. He had burner phones talking to Khrushchev, the 1963 version of a burner phone, right? So like that was the number one priority. And here we go. We got the Israelis that he already knows they're stealing our fucking uranium. He already knows about Somborn Institute. He fucking hates these cocksuckers already. And then then they won't let him into Dimona. And that was the last fucking straw. He was going to end Israel. And that would have been the greatest goddamn gift to the fucking planet of all time. Israel
Yeah,
is a fucking is a cesspool of a fucking nation. It never should have existed in the first place. The idea that white people have any claim to the goddamn Palestine is so fucking stupid. It ignores the real history of the land of Israel. And the true history of the black Israelites. I mean, it's fucking disgusting. The nation of Israel should never have existed, and they have been behind every horrific act on the planet since 1946, starting with the bombing of the King David Hotel, leading up to Kennedy, which is the time when I tell you, we lost our sovereignty. Like I said on day zero, we're an Israeli colony. We lost our sovereignty on November 22nd, 1963, where they implanted their own puppet, Lyndon Johnson, the third Jewish president, whose handler was in the White House, Jack Valenti, who was the other shooter on the grassy knoll. So Our country was toast on that day. It's been a downhill slide ever since on purpose. Our country's being destroyed. The West has to be destroyed. It's biblical prophecy shit so that they can have a world of their own. That's what the fuck's going on.
Yeah, the
Period.
biblical prophecy thing. People don't understand that shit. Like these people, people are
I
like, well, I don't
fought
believe in
against
the
that.
Bible,
I
and
spent
it's
years as a fucking researcher, and I fucking would have bet my fucking ball sack that that was total bullshit. It's nonsense. And then I saw it in Kennedy in Dealey Plaza staring me dead in the face, and I can't fucking deny it. The occult and the biblical prophecy
they're
shit
trying
is
to
priority
fulfill
numero uno. Exactly.
revelations and shit.
Your
Like you
own
don't have to
stories. Yes.
yeah,
The killing
you
of
don't have to
Kennedy.
believe in it. They do.
Right. They
That's
do.
what you need to be scared of. Like
And I
they
didn't
believe in
and
this
I didn't
crazy
believe in
shit.
any of that shit, and I thought it was nonsense until I saw it with my own eyes. And now you can never unsee it. Kennedy was killed in a manner consistent with a Jewish ritual sacrifice, a symbolic Purim festival. So there's two. So post 70 AD, when the temple was destroyed, Jews cannot commit a sacrifice. Technically, Judaism ended in 70 AD. This monstrosity today is some other nonsense, some fucking Talmudic, what is it, Babylonian Talmudism, right? This is not Judaism. So, I'm sorry, man. I totally lost my fucking point. I'm
Uh,
high as fuck always, so.
we were talking about Israel, Judaism.
Yeah, it was a symbolic Purim festival. So
Yeah, the ritual.
Purim is the story from the Book of Esther. And the Book of Esther is the story of the salvation of the Jewish people. That's the ultimate theme. Kennedy was killed as the salvation of as analogous to the salvation of the Jewish people based on the biblical story of Esther. The story of Purim and how you have Haman, who was an Achaemenid Persian Empire official who put out a decree to have the king kill all the Jews. Well, you have Esther and you have Mordecai, and they convinced all the Jewish people to fast. And they fasted, and God intervened, and Haman was hanged, and Mordecai was put in his place, and the Jewish people were saved from the evil Haman. That is the story of Kennedy. That is the ultimate secret of Kennedy. That is why Jack Ruby, when he was arrested, said, if it's ever found out what we did, we'll be responsible for the death of 25 million Jews. Okay? He said that because he knew if we ever found out that Kennedy was killed with rabbis wearing ritual robes in Dealey Plaza, children dressed in ritual garb in Dealey Plaza, killing Kennedy, then
It's
it would be another Holocaust.
it's
That was what Jack Ruby was meaning when he said that, because that's exactly what the fuck happened.
yeah, man. It's crazy when people do not believe in this ritualistic occult shit, man. The way it's laid out. I mean, like Daily Plaza is like some sort of pyramid shit, and there's
I
all
feel like
this
I should be the
occult.
poster child for why people should believe, because I didn't. I'm personally, I'm an atheist, and like I figured the smartest people in the world can't believe in this dumb shit. They just can't, and so therefore they're not doing it because they can't, because they're smarter than that. Holy fuck, was I wrong? That's all I
I
gotta
mean,
say
they
about it.
tell like the quote from J.P. Morgan about the stars and shit. Like they. I mean, yeah, it's fucking dark, deep shit. It's crazy. And it drives like I have a buddy of mine who's like, I don't believe in the occult stuff. I don't, I don't believe in God, blah, blah, blah. I'm atheist. It's like, dude, you don't have to believe in it, man. It's the fact that they do. They
Mm-hmm.
do believe in it, and they like, I mean, we see it in Hollywood, we see it in like daily from every like major event, these ritual things that they do. It's right in your face. It's
In your face.
and now it's come to the point where it was in your face, but more of like a esoteric type
Right,
thing.
right.
Now it's in your face exoterically, like they don't give a shit. They know, like, shit. Taco Bell had that commercial a couple years ago about join the Illuminati and shit. It's like, and then they rub your face, they mock you with it, and they rub your face
At
in
this
it.
point, I think
Like,
I could walk through like Central Park and like witness a ritual going down right in front of me, and like have it barely even phase me.
dude,
Like par for the course at this point.
it's yeah, man. Yeah, it's like all the way, even like the Bohemian Grove shit, like all look at all those powerful people, and that was proven that they do that. they worship, or they sacrifice supposedly an effigy of a child. I mean, while it's recordings of it screaming and shit, like,
I love how
yeah,
people
I
who
mean,
defend that shit are just like, oh, they're just messing around.
yeah, they're just playing.
What are they playing?
They do
What
it
is the
every
shit?
year at this time, at the exact same hour, and with, but they're just playing. It's no big deal. It's no big deal. It's like the people that are like, this time they're telling the truth. This time. They're, I mean, COVID was a big one when everybody, the people are like, well, this time they're definitely telling the truth that it's a real virus and we need these vaccines. I know the other vaccines killed you and already fucked you up and shit, but this time they
God,
they
it's
really are
unfucking
doing
real.
what's good for you. Like, what the fuck, man?
Like, I mean,
It's kind of like Rogan.
I never
Rogan
had,
arguing about. Go ahead.
oh, I never had more chills in my life than when I realized what was going on in March of 2020 with COVID, and they declared the internet. Like, as soon as it clicked what was happening, like, I ain't never been so scared in my fucking life. Like,
Oh, dude,
that was the
it
real
was
deal. That was a
like
failed coup.
March 14th, I think, when of 2020, when Trump stood up there in person and pretty much suspended the Constitution and shit, put us under that Emergency Orders Act, which then
Mhm.
creates that continuity of government. It's like, and then they just ended it not too, what, a couple months ago. Supposedly, Biden finally ended the Emergency Powers Act, which that's scary shit in itself. And now knowing they can call that for fucking weather change or crazy mosquitoes that they release into the air and then give everybody malaria. They're like, well, it's an emergency. You know what we do? We fucking lock everybody down and then stick things in your ass this time. Which is
Um,
funny because that was a joke, and then China started doing,
the
literally
anal
doing
swab. Yeah. Yeah, all the
it.
people who were involved with COVID and the cover up and the push of the vaccine, if it was up to me, I would round them all up in one big fucking camp and I would sink them on a ship in the middle of the fucking ocean.
Oh man, it's
All of them.
so many people.
Like,
It would
bypass your
fill
fucking
2 cruise
trial,
ships, right?
fuck your fucking rights, out to sea with you.
I
Death or
mean,
exile.
when you look at the media and, like, dude, the people on, like, the local news, like, really make me sick
Oh,
because
they're the worst. It's insidious.
they're not there's no actual, like, journalist in the local in your local area. They're just talking head people that just they're given a script for the night. Here's the talking points that everybody is talking about on every fucking channel right now at the exact same time. Here's your little local spot about Susie and whatever, the bicycle shop. And then here's, the rest of your talking points. And that's all they do. And then they do it with a smile and don't even question it, or like every up until just a couple months ago, they were still doing like COVID updates, COVID weekly update. Like, what the fuck? Like, I can't believe you're even saying the shit with a straight fucking face anymore. Like,
So when COVID came out, I went really deep into the flu numbers, and I found the specific pattern of how long it would take from flu to hit its peak to then drop to 5,000. This is like weekly deaths, and then to nothing, right? And it would take pretty much on average, year after year from 2010 all the way through 2017-18 flu season, it would take consistently between 16 and 20 weeks for the flu to disappear from the time it dropped to 5,000. So it would go from a peak, it would drop down to about 5,000, and then from 5,000 weekly deaths to none, it would take 16 to 20 weeks consistently every time without fail. When you got to 20, what was it, 2019 or 20, whatever, the first year of COVID,
yep,
um,
the end of the
it
2019.
went from 5,000 deaths to 0 deaths in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. That was the first fucking major red flag for me. Other than the inflated numbers, I took the first like 3 months worth of numbers and compared it to like standard mortality. And there were some days where they were saying that like 70% of deaths in America were COVID. And I'm like, you're so fucking full of shit.
Oh
70% of
man,
deaths. I'm like, so I started looking at different statistics than most people were looking at the time. And so it became real obvious real quick. And like what they did was if you take the COVID deaths and the flu death season, what they did was they introduced the COVID at a time when flu deaths were on the decline. And so they kind of intersected in this weird like downward slope. And so to me, it was obvious that they just did like a swaparoo with the flu numbers and COVID. And that particular year was set to be the worst flu season we've had yet. And now this year is the worst flu season we've ever had. There's like 65,000 deaths already from the flu. So
Yeah.
if
And
you look,
then
so if
the
you trace the flu
testing,
numbers, it was just a straight line up with 1 year fucking missing, and those numbers that should have been in there were replaced with COVID deaths. So, and then they begin to just get out of control by adding all the gunshots and carjacking victims and like all that shit to
like
COVID deaths.
everything,
Yeah.
and then they were telling people right out in the open that too. Like everybody acts like it, like they really kept, a secret and were, lying to everybody. But then, like, I have all these clips. I just have folders of these clips of COVID and all these little clips through the last 3.5 years, and going through them, it's like, holy shit, they fucking told us straight up. They were
You know, I
literally like
I
in
made a
little bits and chunks. They were
yeah
telling us
yeah.
exactly what the fuck was up, man. They'd go, it's 100% effective, but then they go, well, it's actually blah blah blah. That's against hospitalizations and this non-infection. They'd say it in this little. This part would be big that everybody would run with. It's same when Trump would talk. Trump would talk for fucking 2 hours a night, almost every fucking night. This guy was on. You'll never have a more transparent fucking dude that would go on, say his little spiel, and then take questions for an hour and a half or fucking 2 hours, and take any question. Doesn't care. He'll just fucking just talk. And I don't know. I lost my train of thought thinking about that, 'cause I always think of that. It's like, damn, dude. Like, you get Joe Biden on there, he can't even get through fucking half a teleprompter, and Trump would just sit up there fucking talking about blah blah blah, the warp speed, and they would oh, that's what it was, and take these little sound bites of him. He'd be up there for 2 hours, and they would take that one little, oh, he's saying to shoot up Clorox bleach. Like, what? And that's all they would take out of the whole fucking thing. And it's like, dude, he had like a huge response to that question, and all you took was the Clorox bleach thing. It's crazy, but someone in the back fucking literally just told him you could shoot up Clorox bleach or some shit, you know? But he never even said that. He never
See,
said you could shoot up bleach.
but the thing about Trump, man, like a lot of people are wanting Trump to come back, but like he's the one who gave us this fucking warp speed
Yep.
vaccine fucking bullshit. Like,
And doesn't negate on it either. I mean, he's still, Alex Jones came out and did that video where he's like, "Look, I talked to Trump's people and they said they don't want anybody even talking about the vaccine anymore. I'm sorry." And it's like, okay, that's fucking crazy. But I mean, yeah, because I feel like if none of this indictment shit is on Trump, works. I mean, the last thing they've got is to come out and go, "Look, we fucked up." The vaccine, like Fauci said, sometimes we introduce these vaccines and later on we find out it fucking kills you. It becomes worse. I mean, he said it. He said it on the TV. I mean, you just didn't listen to him, right? He
yeah.
said to Trump it takes 5+ years to come out with a vaccine, but Trump made us fucking do it. Listen to Trump say he forced the FDA, the CDC to do this. Yeah, I mean,
So I know I kind of see Fauci was definitely a decision maker, but that guy, he's the fall. He's, if you ask me, he's the Goyim fall guy in this whole thing.
Fauci.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Um,
going to take all of them, just like in the SPARS document, where it says, at some point the people realize what's up, they turn on everybody, and then they fucking start, throwing people under the bus, like this Redfield when he
right.
went up to
Yeah.
testify, and he's just fucking throwing everybody he's throwing the bus station on top of them,
Yeah.
you know,
I
like,
would even settle for like Fauci having a heart attack in his sleep, because he's not going to face any fucking justice. He's not going to
no,
face scrutiny. He's never going to say a word to Congress. He's going to do his double speak. And so, yeah, I mean, a nice stroke, aneurysm, heart attack, any of the above would be totally okay. And at some point, I mean, at what point do they decide to take people out? Like, it was obvious Epstein had to go. At what point does Fauci become a liability? He's 85. They don't need an excuse. They could fucking heart attack gun that guy
yep.
tomorrow.
Especially since he got the vaccine, you just fucking wipe him out, and then you go, "Oh man,
At this point,
Fauci's vaccine fucking kills people.
yep.
Look at Fauci's dead. It's all Trump's fault." We can even blame a little on Biden. They all said they weren't going to take it, and then they fucking forced it on you anyway. So let's just let's just throw them all out.
So tomorrow is going to be exciting which sucks because I had so much. I was going to start my last chapter in my book. I'm finishing my book this week. I was going to start tomorrow, but tomorrow is going to be a dynamite congressional hearing for the Oversight Committee where they got, what the fuck's this guy's name? The
Devin
whistleblower.
Archer.
Yeah, the whistleblower is supposed to be there, but they're trying to arrest him. And then Gates comes out on fucking Twitter and is like, he better be there, or else Garland better be there, right? So some sparks are going to fly tomorrow. I'm anxious to see what happens. It should be some exciting fucking
See,
television.
the only thing is it's a closed door. It's
Oh,
not
it's
even going
not
to be on
broadcast?
TV.
It ain't broadcast?
Nope. Nope. It's supposed to be a closed door, which is bullshit.
Total bullshit, man.
Especially with all the congressional hearings we've seen, all the hours, I mean, they made it seem like they were putting him up on TV. But what I just was watching something with uh James Comer earlier where he said it's supposed to be closed door because they're trying to his fraud case where he did get found guilty in that, and he's supposed to serve a year. He appealed it. He's in the middle of that appeal, and then the DOJ sends out a fucking letter yesterday on a Saturday to say, "Hey, let's just get him sentenced and get his fucking ass, throw him in the bus, and let's go. Let's get it done. We need it done by Monday morning. We
Like, do
need
these
this."
people, have they never heard of a thing called optics? Like, do they not know the definition of that fucking word? Because
Dude, they
every
don't
single
give a
goddamn.
fuck. They don't care. I mean, look at what Hunter's fucking lawyers got caught doing. Not smoking the bong. They can do that. It's in California. But fucking having their clerk call in and say, "Oh, hey, we are the prosecution. We sent you some shit we wanted you to look at in respect to, the plea deal with Hunter, but could you get rid of that? Go ahead and throw it. That was an accident that we sent you all that shit." Like, they don't give a shit, dude. It's fucking it's scary, right? We're in this weird thing. You have these guys sitting in a dude in the White House that can potentially pardon everybody, right? Everybody involved can be pardoned by him, including his son. And then all the shit that we've been talking about for over 3 fucking years, or not for over 3 years, the Hunter stuff since 2000. Yeah, well, I guess, for
3 years.
over 3 fucking years is being just the dam is like open now and it's like all over. CNN can't deny it, MSNBC can't deny it. So then it sets us up in a thing of like, you know, we're due for one of those false flags, like a major false flag. And like, if with all the shit that's piled up on these Bidens, because they spent 4 years projecting everything that we have evidence on them, projecting it onto Trump, and they're still fucking doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I could care less about Trump, but it's the whole truth thing and the way they're like, there's so many precedents with just Trump. A whole list of these precedents, these things that have never happened before, all have happened with Trump and with Biden. It's like, holy shit. Like, how many more of those do you need to go, whoa, something's fucking up here, you know? I'm sorry, I get the.
It's just crazy that like the impeachment over Trump was about his phone call to Ukraine to figure out what the fuck was happening.
Yep.
And it turns out that was super duper impeachable offenses done by Biden when he was vice president. So it's like goddamn. It's a pot calling the kettle fucking black like every goddamn time.
Yeah, and anytime something more major comes up on Biden, more evidence that we already knew about, but becoming mainstream, that's when now we're going to charge Trump more with this, or I'm more afraid of like a false flag type situation happening so they can get their fucking lockdown again.
Here's the problem I see with that happening anytime soon is that it appears fairly obvious that COVID was a global coup. It failed. And they immediately transitioned to climate change and trannies, right?
After they fucking told, like, they didn't tell us directly, but they told James O'Keefe, undercover dude, like, yo, we're going straight to climate change. We can actually, and they even Trudeau, he said at one point, we can use, the COVID, what we learned from the COVID into other things like climate change and, like, what? That's no. I mean, y'all was shutting off bank accounts and shit, and
but it's
like
been a
we were
floor.
talking on day zero there, the world coin and the orb thing, like it's just fucking crazy anymore. I mean, yeah, I don't know where I was going with any of
You know,
that.
I think I fucked up like in like 2017. I think I don't remember getting my retina scanned. I did the fucking, the thing at the airport where you can skip the line. You pay like $100 for like
Yeah,
5 years, and like it says in the thing that they scan your retina. I don't remember if I did that or not. I hope I fucking didn't. I might have if it said that you had to. I
I
just
know
don't
I've
recall
never
it.
did the
I
retina
I just wonder if
scans.
I totally like fucked myself forever. Can they like now clone my fucking unborn children and shit because they got my retinal scan? Like,
Oh man. Well, like just the testing and COVID, I said from the get go, I told my listeners, do not fucking get tested. Do not go get tested. Even if you're sick, don't go getting tested unless you wake up in a hospital and have already been tested. Like you went to the hospital unconscious because it's a DNA grab. They're fucking grabbing everybody's fucking DNA so they
oh
can build their
man, what pisses me off? My fucking sister and her whole family and her kids and all that shit did the 23andMe, and so now I know for a fact they could fucking reverse triangulate my fucking DNA from my sisters who
Yeah,
fucking
and
volunteered the shit.
before COVID, for like 4 years, every Christmas was like Alexa and 23andMe. Get your family a 23andMe or get them a little spy. Alexa
Well,
dot.
23andMe was run by the sister and mother of the cunt who ran YouTube.
Yep,
Um,
who is the sister of the one that created Google,
and their
right?
father was a physicist who worked on the Dimona reactor in the Negev Desert that fucking Kennedy got killed over. Like these people are they're multi and
Yes,
intergenerational
legacy
thinkers.
fucking criminals. It's like that's another thing people don't get. You got look at Biden. Biden's been in some sort of office for over my entire life. I'm 41 for over my entire life, which is like a long time. I mean, 40 something plus fucking years and like Pelosi and all these fuckers, they're in their legacy wise. And like we were talking earlier on the other show, the one doing the mouthing, those handlers behind them, it's like those people will end up either handling bigger people or end up sliding into those positions.
I wonder if
When
those like the fucking mouthy chick. I wonder if she is like assigned to her by like a handler, and like she has to report back to the handler all the things that Plaskin does. Like I wonder if it's that kind of relationship.
I don't, it's that one is creepy as shit, man. I mean, the way that lady was tweaking, she was tweaking like as soon as Plinkin started speaking, she just starts fucking twacking, and then her mouth, she is mouthing the whole thing. Because at first, when she got up and leaned into her and said what she said, I had to enhance the audio to hear what she said. And she was just correcting her. And then you go back and you start really looking at her tweaking, and it's like, wait a minute, she's mouthing every fucking word she's saying, like word for word. I mean, to write a speech or whatever the hell that is. I mean, it wasn't even like really a speech. It was just an opening statement. But to memorize it, like, is now it's watching out for this, like every time Plinken's on the screen. Like I don't know why she was like directly left to Jim Jordan, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah, I don't understand her at all. Like she seems to have come out of nowhere, and she had connections to Jeff Epstein, and like who gives two fucks about the goddamn Virgin Islands? Like they don't even have a say in actual voting on anything. It's like a symbolic position. So why the fuck she's the ranking member makes no sense to me.
Yeah, yeah. And the Epstein stuff, there's more and more coming out now with JP Morgan and these bankers.
Like these trafficking rings are nothing new. I mean, like you can
Nope.
directly trace them back, generationally from Ghislaine Maxwell to Robert Maxwell, and then you can connect these same circles to like Bobby Baker and the Bobby Baker scandal that was going on before Kennedy got killed, which entirely just vanished into thin air once Kennedy got killed. And then that connects to like the trafficking rings involving Jack Ruby. Jack Ruby was running women back and forth from Dallas to New Orleans, you know, so involving people like David Ferry and his crew in New Orleans. So all of these like sex trafficking rings, they even connect back to Kennedy, in one way, shape, or form.
It's fucking wild, man. It's a lot of dots.
A lot of
There's
fucking dots. A lot. A lot.
a lot of dots, man. Yeah. Um. Yeah, I don't know.
But I think we're fucked. I mean, this is my ultimate outcome. Like we came to we're fucked. Like
Let's
the America
blackpill it.
America ended on November 22nd, 63. We're a fucking Israeli colony, and it has been a steady and constant journey downhill ever since, intentionally by those who now control our country via, um, interest groups, APAC, every fucking Zionist organization, which is every organization in the West these days, because they've all been infiltrated. We have documents showing the overt infiltration of all of our institutions, from schools and universities to radio stations, newspapers. Like, it's all been documented. We're done. We're toast. This is a shell of a country. I feel like a man without a country. I was born in '76. Kennedy got killed in '63. So I feel like I've never had a homeland, a genuine one. And so,
Yeah, and like someone pointed out, talking earlier about the flag. Uh, Kennedy was the first president of the first president the modern flag was flown for, and like the symbolism of the flag, someone was pointing out the 13 stripes being the 13 bloodlines, and then the 50 stars representing not the states but the people, bordered in the water of the blue. And then you get into what is it? Now I'm fucking admirative. Now I can't even think of it. The law of the water.
is that like a secret society thing?
What, maritime law?
Oh, maritime law. Okay, I got you.
Yeah, I mean, when they point out that our American flag has the 13 uh, stripes, right? The red and white stripes, 13 bloodlines. That's what controls the world. And then you put the 50 stars, which are supposed to represent the 50 states, but really it represents the people, right?
Hmm.
Because the state is the people. And then it is bordered in the water of the blue on the flag, representing the maritime law that which we are ruled under.
For some reason, these people really like symbolism. Like, symbolism
Oh,
is like,
fuck yeah.
it's unreal. It's really fucking ridiculous. It's if Like, it boggles the fucking mind that intelligent people would engage in behaviors like this. And like the numerology and like the fucking just craziest fucking shit, like digging for answers where none are going to be found. I mean, it's just ultimately it's shocking. The people who rule over us, like, totally fuck them to death.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and the symbolism. I mean, it's put in everything. It's like it's fucking even on your Oreos, man. Your fucking Oreos have crazy symbols. I mean, with the double cross and shit
Right.
on it, and the fucking Maltese cross and the Jesuits, and it's like, what the fuck is the deal? Nabisco is Jesuits. What? I just wanted a fucking Oreo, man.
But, like, I don't think anybody really understands these secret societies and the all this covert stuff. Like, I don't think anybody has really completely figured it out, because there is too much of this overlap with this occult stuff. And I think most people who study like the CIA they don't pull the occult stuff into it. You know what I mean? And I didn't for a long time. And
And then you start pulling the occult stuff, and it's like these little missing pieces.
yeah, yep.
Yeah, I mean, because everything's a fucking ritual. I mean, it's crazy. Even like the inauguration of the president, they down the road at the Scottish Rite, they're having the ritual of the Osiris Rite ritual or whatever, where they're trying to invoke the spirit of Osiris to project it into the incoming president. It's like, what the fuck, dude?
So
That's going on while
what I
the inauguration's happening.
what I think part of this obsession is that I think that they think that these ancient texts hold some sort of secrets that can still be uncovered. So when you look at like this trans movement, a huge fucking organization funding most of this shit is the Aspen Institute, which is mostly funded by the U.S. fucking government, but it's run by the Pritzkers, right? And so the Pritzkers are billionaires out of Chicago. There's even a Pritzker who's the governor of Chicago. But the billionaire Pritzker is funding, besides all this trans shit, funded a project to translate this ancient text called the Zohan or the Zohar or something like that. Like, so they're actively engaging in this occult stuff as they're pushing this transgender androgynous shit, which is directly out of the Talmud, onto us. You know, it's crazy. It is coming in at the highest levels. Why the U.S. government is funding this shit is beyond me. Other than the obvious capture of the government.
Yeah, and then the way it's accelerated with technology, with computers, with cell
Mm-hmm.
phones, and then it's just so encapsulated in like everyday life. Nobody, like, people don't even understand they take part in rituals. Like graduation, for instance, is a whole ritual. I mean, with Saturn and shit, with the black robe, and then you have the mortar board, right, which is Masonic. For the Freemasons, the mortar board, you put your, but it's also a two-dimensional cube for the Saturn people. It's like, what the fuck, dude? And all you're doing is graduating and into the indoctrination class, basically.
I just don't understand how they get people. Like, you see, like, LeBron James doing the shit, before the fucking,
Yep.
before, like, how the fuck is LeBron James get into the fucking Freemasons? Or Jay-Z? How the fuck do these people get pulled in there? Like, and
Well,
they
that's
get,
the Bouliers, man. That's the Sigma Pi Phi type shit.
did they only
So,
get in there? Did they only get big because they were Freemasons? I mean, did the Freemasons make them
I mean,
because
it's
they're one
got
of
to be
them?
something. What I see is every single one of these people, all these people that are on our TV have gotten somewhere. They all practice magic and they all are connected in some way. I mean, nobody gets to the fucking top by just rocking. That's a lie, AC. That you don't get to the top, if you want to rock and roll or whatever. Or it's a long way to the top if
Right.
you want to rock and roll. Anyways, you get what the fuck I'm trying to
Yeah.
say. But they're all doing these magic and these rituals. Like LeBron James didn't even go to college, but yet he's got that the Boulier, the Sigma Pi Phi, basically lion with the fucking man's head or whatever, tattooed on his chest, man. That's for a fraternity. You're not even in a fraternity. And then it goes to like the police. Everybody wants to end police brutality and the blue shield and shit, and accountability for police. You got to end the FLP first. The Fraternal Order of Police. They're police, for Christ's sakes. They're grown adults. What the fuck are they? What do they need a fraternity for? Right? I mean, why would they need a secret society for the police if all it is there is it's their blue
Well,
shield?
so I don't think I mentioned this yet, but I was a cop for like 8 years, 8.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
I spent years in school getting my degrees and then going through the police academy and all that stuff. And so I can tell you that, like, from my experience, they were just our fucking union. The only purpose of the Fraternal Order of Police is if I shoot some guy, they're going to run to my defense because they need to protect policehood as in general.
Yeah,
So,
they're the blue shield, right?
yeah.
They're the ones that are covering, and then like the Masonic stuff and the Freemasons and the Shriner thing, like most
I,
Shriners are police, lawyers, doctors. They're high up Shriners.
it's so weird, though. Like, I worked for an agency that had about 150 for most of my career, and, like, I never saw any of that stuff. Like, I never saw any of the weird fucking police, like, stereotypical police corruption type stuff or involvement with Freemasons or never any weird shit. Never, not once. But maybe where I worked was just an exception.
Yeah, I don't know. There's this police chief who he was the chief of police of Aurora out there in Colorado,
Mm-hmm.
I believe. He was there when the theater shooting. He was part of the state troopers or something out there. Anyways, his department got shut down because of him. I guess a couple officers were trying to bring the FOP into his department or something. I don't know the whole fucking story.
Well, I
It's
know
just the guy
Aurora.
ended up as my boss here driving dump trucks, and it's like, what the
No
fuck,
shit.
dude?
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
someone's like, he was involved with the theater shooting and stuff, and I'm like, what? And he's
Did he
like,
tell you
well, he
anything
was a police
juicy?
officer, huh?
You hear anything juicy about that? About the
What
theater
about
shooting? About the theater
from
shooting?
him or
Yeah,
just in
from him.
general?
From him.
No, because I never got a chance. I as soon as someone said he was an ex-cop, he was there for the shooting at the theater, and then he left from being a police officer to being the head of security for Disney, and then for somehow he's in this
That's not
small
sus.
town, dude, and then he's the fucking truck manager for a newly established dump truck company,
CIA dump truck company.
dude. So right away, right I right away start searching, clicking the fucking old keys, and boom, I'm pulling up that this guy, he like assaulted an officer, and then these officers with the FOP, and someone slashed tires and fucking pissed all over his desk and shit. And it's like, dude, I told a couple people, and it really pissed everybody off, or not everybody, but him off, and the people in the office there. They're like, messenger us, no more rumors. We're having a meeting about this, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, dude, for one, people need to know if my boss lost his job because he was assaulting employees, like, I need to know who pissed in whose desk. Did you piss in a desk or did someone piss in your desk? What the fuck is going on here? And then I brought that up to one of our other high ups, and they dropped the whole meeting and said there was no meeting. We're not having a meeting. And they just kind of like pushed the whole thing like under the rug. It was fucking weird. But then the company shut down. It was just weird because the FOP thing. We are talking about the FOP.
Mm-hmm.
It just reminded me of him. Someone was trying to bring the FOP in or some fucking shit.
Well, the funny thing is, like, the biggest police unions are like the FOP, the PBA, and the Teamsters. But the Teamsters was like run by the fucking mob for like ever, you know. So I just think it's ironic.
Yeah, but yeah, when you get into that Masonic stuff, like the Shriners, there you got to be a 33 to 32nd or 33rd degree Mason to be able to join the Shriners. It says right on their fucking website.
Really?
Yeah, because the other day I was looking up in Wisconsin, there's a sect of the Shriners called the Tripoli Shriners, like the Tripoli Shriners,
Right.
dude, in Wisconsin, right? So I went to their website and I was looking at it, and it says right on there that you got to be a high ranking 32nd to 33 degree level Mason to be able to get into the Shriners. And then from the Shriner, like, you work your whole life up to be a clown, right? A jester, a joker. And then after that, if you're lucky to be one of the 12 to be asked to be a jester, there's a level above the Shriners that very few know about. And then it goes even higher to that Quetzalcoatl, to the Q or some shit,
It's a
which is
secret cow
fucking
level.
yeah, it's fucking weird, man. But I came from a town that had like a Shriner temple there, and all of our parades every summer had the little Shriners in their little fucking cars, and then growing up and finding out, like their bloody fezzes and their symbolism, and like they're probably trafficking kids and somewhere down in the Bahamas and shit. It's
Yeah, so
fucked up.
ultimately, I think we as a species just deserve extinction at this point. It's like this is beyond saving. So a
Yeah,
giant meteor is like the only solution in my book.
I think someone said a meteor was coming in 2024. They've pinpointed a
Yeah,
meteor.
I wanna start a secret sex cult in the mountains. So
Yeah,
that worships the
wear
incoming meteor.
Nikes, drink punch.
And flowing robes commando.
Well, we're getting to the end here, Corey. If you want to tell people where they can find you,
Yeah,
what you got going on?
CoryHughes.org. But I highly recommend everybody pre-order my book. It's buymeacoffee.com/JFKbook, because you get my notes if you pre-order the book. And so once that book comes out in about a month, I'm shooting for September 1st release. You ain't getting the notes unless you pay for them, and it's going to be expensive. So highly recommend everyone pre-order as soon as possible.
Hell yeah. What else you got going on?
Besides that, I do Cory Hughes Bloody History. I actually read the documents. Like, I read them for like hours at a time. So every single fucking word people can get exposed to without having to read them themselves. I think I got like good solid 40. I got like 26, 27 episodes, a solid 40 plus hours of me reading documents. So yeah, it takes a very special kind of person to be able to sit through it, but it's worth every fucking minute if you want to understand Kennedy.
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely have to check that out. I've sat through all of someone put Bill Cooper's Babylonian school thing that he was doing way back in the day on the radio. They put it on Spotify. It's like 44 episodes.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, I've listened to all that. I listen to I'll listen to people read documents.
It can be dry. It can be really dry because I'm going through and I'm trying to explain them in context. And a lot of times you get a lot of duplication. You get a lot of stuff that's just irrelevant. Especially with the FBI files, they didn't have any rhyme or reason apparently to group things together in any particular way. So yeah, it can get a little dry and tedious, but it's what you got to do if you want to understand things. You need to read every fucking word to be able to understand. So I mean, I've probably read somewhere at this point. I calculate about 120,000 pages of just documents.
Yeah,
Not a,
someone in the chat says you got 600 plus pages of notes in a PDF or
yeah, when
something.
you pre-order my book, you get my PDF with my notes.
They say it's well worth it.
Yeah, it's sick.
So
It's got
fucking pre-order
it's
that.
got like 3 books worth of material in it. I probably need to. Yeah, I should probably charge an arm and a leg for it when my book actually comes out because it's got so much, so much. Connects to the Holocaust, connects to Martin Luther King. All my notes cover everything.
Everything wrapped up in one little
Yeah, but it's grossly
fat
incomplete.
book.
In like the last couple months that I've been writing this book, I have a I've been reading and then writing. I haven't been clipping notes the way I used to, but I probably could have clipped another 500 pages of notes in just the past couple months, which I will do at some point because I'll have to have another set of notes to distribute. But yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, this thing is like there's no way to tell the whole story in one sitting. I mean, it's so long and tedious and multifaceted and requires so much backstory. Like my presentation, I gave a presentation. It's on Odyssey. It's about 7 hours long, and it tells the whole story start to finish. But it took 7 hours. And if I were to do that same presentation today, it'd probably be like 10 or 12 hours because I have a lot more information than I did when I made that. So
Damn, man. It's a lot of research, but someone's got to do it.
it took me 3 years nonstop. Like I was like fucking like tweaked out in my room for like 14 hours a day just reading documents. Literally for 3 years. That's what I did for 3 years straight. Just sat in my room and read. Like I read everything I needed to
Hell
know,
yeah.
and it took me 3 years to crack 99% of it. And the other 1% will take me the rest of my life. So the stuff I'm into now is like connecting the Israelis to the actual to Clay Shaw and a bunch of other guys who were in Dallas. I got to prove who was in Dallas. That's one of the things I'm gonna do next. So
Yeah, be
because they
sure
were
to.
all there, they had to see. It was like Caesar. They needed to be there. All of them were there. I have no doubts. Maybe not Dulles, but I guarantee you Angleton was there. Shackley, Joanitas, Morales, they were all there. They had to see for themselves. All the Israelis were there. Menachem Begin, I have no doubts at all. So
Yeah, I need to pre-order that book.
but yeah, the book will be out at the latest September 1st. I'm going to try to finish it this week, and it should be formatted and ready to go in the next couple weeks.
Hell yeah, man. Thanks for coming on and
Yeah, I appreciate you having me.
sharing that. And yeah, I mean, doing the research, doing the legwork on this.
Yeah, I started in July 2018, and really, I just consider myself having wrapped it up like less than a year ago. So it was really like 3 years solid, and then like a year to kind of figure out what to do with the information I had, and then a year to write the book, give or take.
All right, man. Well, we'll have to do it again.
Hey,
Maybe after your
anytime.
book comes out.
Yep, anytime.
So, all right, man. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next week.
It's a grotesque postmodern psyop, and anyone who's fallen for this is brain damaged. It's a grotesque postmodern psyop, and anyone who's fallen.
Yeah, I was on mute for some reason. I don't know what the hell just happened there.
It's a grotesque postmodern psyop, and anyone who's fallen for this is brain damaged. It's a grotesque postmodern psyop, and anyone who's fallen for this is brain damaged. It's a grotesque postmodern psyop, and anyone who's fallen for this is brain damaged. It's a grotesque postmodern psyop, and anyone who's fallen for this is brain damaged. It's a grotesque postmodern psyop, and anyone who's fallen for this is brain damaged. It's a grotesque postmodern psyop, and anyone who's fallen for this is brain damaged. It's a grotesque postmodern psyop, and anyone who's fallen for this is brain damaged. It's a grotesque postmodern psyop, and anyone who's fallen for this is brain damaged. It's a grotesque post